Set in December 2012, this speech details what we believe the president might say on the day America's foreign creditors finally stop lending us money and demand repayment for our country's debts, the largest debts ever accumulated in the history of mankind. Our politicians, both Democrats and Republicans, believe this day will never come. Meanwhile, the world's biggest bond investor, the world's leading real estate investor, the International Monetary Fund, and our number one creditor, the Chinese, say otherwise. "7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, December 4th, 2012. From the East Room of the White House.
My fellow Americans, as you are now well aware, the events that transpired today are unprecedented in our nation's history. The stock market and the nation's banks will be closed for at least the next 5 business days. And the U.S. dollar has essentially collapsed because our foreign creditors have refused to buy dollar-denominated debt at any price. We have several important issues to discuss this evening, but I want to first make it clear that these events are not the result of 1 or 2 presidential terms, nor the result of just a handful of congressional decisions. These problems have been systemic in U.S. policy for decades, and I'd like to take a minute to explain the origin of today's collapse so we are all on the same page moving forward. You see, a little more than 40 years ago, the value of the U.S. dollar was tied directly to the price of gold. In other words, you could show up at a bank with your dollars and exchange them for gold. But on August 15, 1971, Republican President Richard Nixon severed that tie, and by 1973, the value of the dollar fluctuated freely against other world currencies. Since then, it's been a bumpy ride, with wild swings in the value of the U.S. dollar, both up and down. But in roughly the past decade, the value of our currency, the U.S. dollar, has basically been in steep decline. Look at the chart I've prepared. When I first took office in 2009, my administration inherited the toughest economic situation we've seen since the Great Depression, including an economy that shed more than 2 million jobs. And in the ensuing years, the situation got even worse for the economy and for the U.S. dollar. In early 2011, the International Monetary Fund issued a stern warning that we as Americans would face a severe shock if we could not get our debt under control. Around the same time, the Wall Street Journal ran an article titled, "Why the Dollar's Reign is Near an End." The rating agency Moody's followed up with a warning about a downgrade to the credit rating of the United States government. And finally, Chinese central bank official Li Dao said we were playing with fire regarding our debt limits. You might not think it's important what officials from China and other Asian nations say, but it is. In fact, very important, because China and Japan lend us more money than the next 10 countries combined. But even with these warnings, as little as a year ago, the U.S. dollar was still fully functioning as the world's most important currency. Back then, 85% of foreign exchange transactions around the world involved the U.S. dollar. OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, set the price of oil in dollars. And more than 60% of the foreign reserves of central banks and governments around the globe were held in U.S. dollars. Today, none of these things are true. Despite our best efforts, the situation has gotten much worse than anyone in my administration could have anticipated. I am sorry to report I could not do anything to stop this crisis. The extent of this collapse was simply beyond our capabilities. And I don't want to sugarcoat it. The situation is likely to get worse, much worse, before it gets better. As I mentioned, all U.S. stock markets will be closed for at least the remainder of this week. You will not be able to buy or sell U.S. securities until the markets reopen. And all U.S. banking institutions will be closed for the rest of the week as well. You will not be able to withdraw money, write checks, or access safety deposit boxes. We don't yet know when the markets or the banks will reopen. In addition, because the U.S. dollar is now basically worthless in the world markets, the prices for basic goods and services in America, which were already climbing rapidly over the past few years, have recently jumped off the charts. Take the price of a gallon of gasoline, for example. According to the Energy Administration Association, the price of a gallon of gasoline went up only 20% in 10 years between 1990 and 2000. But between the beginning of 2009 and early 2011, prices shot up 125%. And since our debt ceiling agreement of last year, prices have shot up another 150%. Gas for the average American now costs more than $7 per gallon. Prices for nearly everything have skyrocketed versus the dollar. How high prices will go is anyone's guess. Because our federal government has to do some major reconfiguring, for the foreseeable future, all non-essential government services will come to an immediate halt, and even many critical services will operate on a drastically reduced basis. Mail service, for example, will operate just once a week on Wednesdays. Veterans hospitals will be accepting emergency patients only, and Freedom Cards, the government's food program for lower-income Americans, will not be accepted for the next 7 days. As drastic as these steps may seem, they are necessary because we simply must get our fiscal house in order. We must ensure the stability of the U.S. dollar. Failing to do so could be catastrophic for our country's future. I also want to make it clear that even in a time of crisis, we are putting the American people's safety first. The U.S. National Guard is on full orange alert at key positions throughout the country, and I have been in close contact this afternoon with our allies in Canada, Mexico, France, and Great Britain, just to name a few. They are prepared to step in with military and humanitarian aid if necessary. For Americans who do not have necessary supplies or money to last until the banks and other financial institutions reopen, we have arranged more than 150 temporary shelters nationwide, where you will find food, water, and emergency medical care. I also want to make one thing clear. This is not the time to panic. The American people have been through difficult times before. It's important to remember that we are all in this together, and that is why my goal in addressing you this evening is twofold. First, I'd like to clarify the facts of exactly what happened today. There are wild rumors being spread, especially on the internet, and I want to set the record straight. Second, I want to talk about what we are doing to solve this problem, to ensure the stability of our currency, the U.S. dollar, and to prevent this problem from occurring in the future. So first, let's recap the day's events. At around 8 a.m. this morning, U.S. Treasury officials reported that the Treasury Automated Auction Processing System, or TAPS, received no bids in yesterday's government bond auction. What many Americans don't realize is that for many years, our country has depended on investors to give the U.S. Treasury billions of dollars every single week just to keep our government operating. Most of our creditors are foreign governments, like the Chinese and Japanese. With our total debt now in excess of $15 trillion, the U.S. Treasury's weekly funding demands now routinely exceeds $100 billion. The size of these debts means that there are very few investors anywhere in the world big enough to provide us with the credit we need. And, apparently, none of those regular lenders appeared yesterday afternoon on TAPS. In other words, as of 7:30 a.m. this morning, there were no bids to buy U.S. Treasuries at any price. In other words, our line of credit was essentially cut off. I spent the morning speaking on the phone with the central bankers of our largest creditors, officials in China, Japan, Great Britain, Brazil, Canada, Taiwan, and Russia. We have several discussions in the works, although I am not privileged to say much more about these talks at the moment. It appears for the moment these countries are not willing to purchase any more U.S. government debt at any price. Of course, this U.S. Treasury auction failure set up a swift panic in the financial markets earlier today. When I instructed the Treasury Secretary to close the New York Stock Exchange at 12 noon, the market as a whole had dropped 37% in just the first 2.5 hours of trading on that day. Soon after, I met with the Federal Reserve Board, and we instructed all banking institutions to close at 2 p.m. until further notice, to avoid a run on the U.S. dollar. Dozens of banks across the country reported long lines of depositors wishing to withdraw their savings, and many of these banks simply ran out of cash. The reason the markets have reacted this way is simple. U.S. Treasury bonds are the foundation of the world's monetary system. Hundreds of various financial instruments, everything from mortgage rates in the United States to value of stocks in Bangladesh, use the U.S. Treasury market as a key reference. The price of nearly everything, all around the world, depends on what investors are willing to spend on U.S. Treasury bonds. And right now, there are no investors big enough to lend us the money we need. It has basically turned the entire financial world upside down. So what will happen next? Well, that's the second part of what I want to discuss with you tonight. First, I want to reiterate that now is not the time to panic. Yes, the situation is bad, very bad, but we are working to get things under control, and we will take every step necessary to get the financial system up and running once again. I have been hearing reports all day about selfish individuals cleaning out store shelves, emptying their bank accounts, and even preparing to flee the country. In Phoenix, for example, we heard reports of a mob overwhelming a gas station employee. In Chicago, my hometown, I read a report about how a mob apparently overran a grocery store and actually held the employees hostage while they stole thousands of dollars worth of goods. Read my lips. Financial crisis or not, if you break the law in this country, you will be caught and you will be brought to justice. For this reason, I have also instituted martial law in the United States for the next 7 days and a 10 p.m. curfew nationwide. Members of all 4 military branches have been deployed to secure government buildings and other sensitive locations and to maintain order. Of course, as I mentioned, the most important thing we need to do right now is to get our fiscal house in order. To do that, it is critical that each of us makes our best attempt to go about our business as usual. Hoarding food, gasoline, or medical supplies, and protesting in front of banks or other financial institutions is not going to help the situation. Our number one priority right now is to ensure the stability of the U.S. dollar so that we can get the wheels of the financial markets and commerce moving again. And that is why my cabinet members and I have come up with a 3-step plan, which is already being put into place. Step number 1 is to find investors who are willing to purchase U.S. Treasuries. We have reached out so far, for example, to the oil exporting nations of Ecuador, Venezuela, Libya, Nigeria, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia. We will have answers from these nations shortly on what they may be able to bring to the table as far as purchasing U.S. Treasuries. We have also instituted a policy of, effective immediately, requiring all public and private U.S. pensions to hold at least 20% of their assets in U.S. Treasuries. This will be part of Executive Order 13550 and will soon be taken up by Congress as part of the Retirement Account Allegiance Act. This executive order gives all Americans the opportunity to help our government in a time of great need. A significant portion of all retirement accounts, public and private, will now go to purchase U.S. Treasuries. Step 2 is to begin the immediate liquidation of some of our most valued, non-essential assets, including the Hoover Dam, Yellowstone Park, and certain drilling rights to the Gulf of Mexico. I spent more than an hour on the phone this morning with investors from Brazil, Russia, and Canada who are interested in purchasing these federally owned assets and more. We are also preparing to liquidate 50% of the gold holdings at Fort Knox and the Federal Reserve Bank of New York's vault in Manhattan. As you probably know, gold prices climbed nearly 100% today, and with gold trading at well over $3,000 per ounce, we expect to be able to raise a substantial amount of money by selling a portion of our holdings. These sales will commence within the next 24 hours. Step 3 is to boost revenue immediately. For this reason, we are temporarily doubling the federal income tax rates at all levels of income and disallowing all tax deductions. This means that if your federal income tax rate before today was 10%, it will be 20% from now until at least the end of 2015. If your rate before today was 35%, your new rate will now be 70% until at least the end of 2015. This balanced approach asks everyone to give without requiring anyone to sacrifice too much. At the same time, we have completely eliminated all taxes on lower income families and plan to double the size of the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program once we have gotten the financial system working again. Never has a government of this nation been responsible for taking care of so many. That is something we should all be proud of. By raising all federal tax rates across the board, we have an equitable solution for all Americans to carry their share of the burden in this time of crisis. Please keep in mind that these new tax rates go into effect retroactively, dating back to the beginning of the present calendar year. Every tax-paying U.S. citizen will need to file a new Form 1049 with the Internal Revenue Service within the next 30 days to make back payments and ensure that enough money is being withheld from your current pay. Fellow citizens, I know these actions may seem drastic, but again, desperate times call for desperate measures. If we choose not to take these drastic steps, there is no telling where this financial crisis could lead. Now is the time to put country above self and set personal grievances aside for the greater good. Let us remember the Americans who held this country together during its most difficult hours, who put aside pride and party to form a more perfect union. That's what I am asking of you, the American people, today. For even in the midst of this crisis, I believe in my heart that America remains the greatest country on earth. And while we may be down, we are by no means out. Thank you. God bless you. And may God bless the United States of America.